Um, so our next topic is the economic environment for business. So a business, we should understand how a business operates in the economy that we are in. So we are going to look at terms which you are familiar with, some you are not familiar with. But most of the focus on economics part is most of the economics. So the first thing we should appreciate is outline of microeconomic policy. So what is microeconomics? Microeconomics involves the study of individual markets and firms. So you try to study the individual markets and firms. So it focuses most on three areas: supply, demand, and pricing. That's what microeconomic policy focuses on. Now, what is micro? That was micro, but now what is macroeconomics? So macroeconomics, now we don't look at individual things, now we study the whole economy. So we're looking at issues like growth, inflation, and unemployment. Economic policy. So what is economic policy? Economic policy government actions to influence the economy. So what should the government do to influence the economy? So it could be issues like maybe reducing the price of fuel, as what the government did previously, or maybe reducing the price of meat. Those are economic policy. So economic policy aims to balance growth, to ensure stability, and also to ensure there's equity. For instance, in Malawi, there was an issue, there was an instance whereby people who are poor, they do not manage to buy maize. So the government tried to ensure that everyone can buy maize. That's equality. So what are the objectives of having an economic policy? So there are four objectives: to promote high growth, people should grow, there should be low inflation, as what is happening now. Food inflation is lower, there should be full employment in the country, and there should be balance of payment stability. So in the exam, questions like this will come as a multiple choice. So which of the following are objectives of economic policy? So I said high growth, low inflation, full employment, and balance of payment stability. Let's start with balance of payment stability. What do we mean as one of the objectives of economic policy? So balance of payment policy will actually mean we should balance imports and exports. We should not have too excessive imports, like what happens in Malawi. So this is to balance it. And also we should prevent excessive foreign debt. We should not borrow too much from foreign entities, just as what Malawi does. So prevent excessive debt and prevent imports over exceeding exports. Now, within government or within the economy, there might be policy conflicts or conflicts in policy objectives. For example, high inflation versus high growth. Low inflation versus high growth. People want prices of goods to be lower, but at the same time, you want your economy to grow. You should take note, countries which their prices of goods are very high, the economy also grows, because it means people who do business will be making a lot of money. That's the understanding. Another conflict could be low unemployment versus stable prices. We want prices to be lower, but people are not employed. Then it's not possible to achieve those objectives. Then economic growth versus environmental protection. We want the economy to grow, but we are trying to protect the environment. Don't cut trees. Don't use charcoal. Right? In that way, maybe the economy cannot grow. Because if you don't cut trees, people will not will not construct houses. Because we need timber for the houses, for instance. Now, fiscal policy. We hear these things in radio and what we are saying. Our fiscal policy, monetary policy, what are they? So fiscal policy and demand management. What is a fiscal policy? Fiscal policy occurs when government uses spending and taxation to influence demand. So the government can spend more money, for example, political rallies, what the government does sometimes, or sometimes buying maize from other countries. They do that deliberately so that they create demand for money. Maybe there should be less money in the economy. And also sometimes government can use tax to influence demand. So maybe reducing the tax rates so that people buy more, or increase the tax rates so that people buy less. That's a fiscal policy. So how does government use the fiscal policy? So government intervenes in three ways. Number one, spending more money and financing this expenditure they borrow. So the government can spend more and borrow from outside. Secondly, collecting more in taxes without increasing public spending. So making sure that they collect more money in taxes. And also the government can collect more in taxes in order to increase public spending. So make sure that people spend a lot of money, they buy goods. As people are buying goods, they are paying more in taxes. So we call that as diverting income between economies. Fiscal policy and the business. So how does fiscal policy and the business work hand in hand? So you should know that when tax rates change, investment decisions also affected. When the tax rates are high, people may invest. Therefore, when the government spends, business opportunities can also arise. Especially let's give an example during campaigns. During campaigns, people who have restaurants, they make a lot of money. So that's what we mean. As government is spending, businesses also have opportunities. Monetary policy. We look at fiscal, which is about taxes and government spending. Now let's look at monetary policy. So monetary policy is mostly about how we influence the interest rates and the exchange rates. So the monetary policy has got two main laws. The first law is to control money supply and interest rates. So to ensure that money is not freely available. Money is available at the reserve bank, but it becomes very scarce just because of the monetary policy. Two, we should maintain economic stability. So the economy should be stable, where our value of our currency should be meaningful. Now, what are the main targets of monetary policy? There are four of them. The first one should control inflation. Prices should not be increasing now and again. Number two, we should stabilize exchange rates. Like now, the kwacha has stabilized. It's not changing much. So kwacha and the dollar 1.7 maybe for a long time. Then we should also support employment and growth. So we're trying to make sure that people are employed and there is growth. Also, control the volume of expenditure. Control how much expenditure we have. It's not overspend as a government. So those are the targets of money. So those are some of the questions which are common in multiple choice. So which are the foreign targets of monetary policy? Factors influencing exchange rates. So factors which can cause devaluation of your currency. So there are 5 main factors. The first one is interest rates. Now when interest rates are increasing, you should expect your currency also to devalue. That's the first reason. One is because as an entity, you'll be forced to pay a lot of money. You borrowed less amount of money, but because you have interest, you'll be ending up paying a lot of money. That's a sign that your currency is devaluing. Inflation rates. If prices of goods are inflated, it basically indicates that the value of your currency is also losing value. Government policy on intervention to control exchange rates. So the government sometimes can intervene, can say reduce the exchange rate. Let's devalue our currency so that we have more sales of tobacco, for instance. Then balance of payments. So to ensure balance of payments whereby we are controlling imports and exports. So when you have got more imports than exports, your currency is likely to lose value than when you have got exports more than imports. Speculation. Speculation is when people speculate. They just they say, what can we use another way instead of speculation? So they just talk about an event before it happens. To say maybe the kwacha will be valued. Next year the kwacha will be 5,000 kwacha for $1. If that happens, people will be forced to keep dollars in their houses. Then that shall lead to devaluation of the currency. Now, as a country, why should we have an exchange rate policy, or as a government? So there are 4 reasons. The first one is to rectify a balance of trade deficit. Trade deficit is when you have got more imports than exports. Let's say import $1,000, exports $200. So that is a trade deficit. And also to prevent a trade surplus. Trade surplus is when exports over exceed imports. You have exported worth $10,000 and you have imported $2,000. There's a balance of $8,000. That's a surplus. So you should not have. It's good to have more exports, but they should not over exceed imports. And also to emulate economic conditions in other countries. So to make sure that our economic conditions are favorable to other countries as well. Also to stabilize the exchange rate of this currency, thus promote international trade, to ensure that our currency is stable. If your currency is stable, it's easy for you to trade with other countries. But if it's unstable, people will think that your currency is volatile. Now, because the currency is volatile, they will be afraid of trading with you. They will think that your currency will lose value each and every time. In exchange rates, we have got 2 types of exchange rates. We have the fixed as well as the floating exchange rates. So in a fixed exchange rate, what happens is that the government will set the value, let's say $2,000 per kwacha, but will not control the increases in prices. That's the fixed. While floating rate is whereby the exchange rate is not determined by the government, it will be allowed to change. It will change based on market forces. It will change based on how the market is reacting, how you are exporting, for instance, how the price of maize is behaving on the market. But here, the government can control inflation. So you should take note of this. In the capital markets, speculation has a much bigger impact in the short term. Why? It's because supply and demand are bound to change. So in the short term, speculation is a major cause of devaluation of the currency. Because people will always be speculating to say the kwacha may devalue or the price of maize will increase. So that is the major cause. Now, how do we manage exchange rate risk? So we have got 4 methods. We will look at forward contracts, dealing in hard currency, invoicing in home currency, as well as outsourcing to a local market. Those are some of the